there is something, okay, Shreyas here has an absolute meaning. Because Arjuna says, I am your Shishya, please teach me, the absolute meaning is conveyed. Shishya can also mean many things. There is an Acharya Shishya, a dance Shishya, both of which apply to Arjuna, as well as many others. In all of them, one factor is missing, the surrender. By asking Krishna to teach him, Arjuna became a Shishya, a disciple. As a student, he surrendered himself to Krishna. As we saw earlier, there are three words in Sanskrit for student: Vidyarthi, Atevasi, and Shishya. Vidyarthi can be anyone having a desire for knowledge. Everyone wants to know everything, but that does not mean that effort is made to gain knowledge. And, and, anti, and
Antevati.
Antevati is the one who makes this effort. This type of student goes to a teacher, joins the ranks, joins the courses, enrolls in the university. That does not mean that he or she understands what is being taught in the class. The student may simply be sitting there accomplishing nothing. The third word for student is Sishya. Sishya refers to a student who is qualified to be taught based on his or her capacity to understand. By using the word Shishya, Arjuna was stating that he thought he was prepared to learn what Krishna had to teach. His compassion indicated that he was mature, but because of certain lack of understanding, there was a confusion with. I have to scroll down a bit,
Yeah.
Guruji. Where was I? That does not mean that he or she understands what is being taught in the class. The student may simply be sitting there accomplishing nothing. The third word for student, Shishya, refers to the student who is qualified to be taught based on his or her capacity to understand. By using the word Shishya, Arjuna was stating that he thought he was prepared to learn what Krishna had to teach. His compassion indicated that he was mature, but because of certain lack of understanding, there was a confusion with reference to dharma and adharma. Arjuna wanted to solve this problem much more fundamentally. He could not but think of his sorrow, which is a human problem. He had discerned sorrow in a situation where sorrow was not expected. He could not proceed with the battle because he did not see any favorable outcome, nothing that he could be proud of, and thus his mind went elsewhere. Where does the mind go in such circumstances? It comes back to oneself. This is where culture comes in. Without culture, one becomes a hobo. In Arjuna's case, his culture, maturity, his upbringing, his lifelong commitment to the values of Dharma, the various privatizations,
Privations. Yeah.
privations he underwent for the sake of Dharma. All of these had paid off in this particular coming back to himself and saying, I don't think that even a heavenly kingdom could remove the sorrow that is in me. Sorrow was therefore the problem, and Arjuna had always heard that there was only one way of removing it. He had to become a Sishya and gain Shishya or Moksha, liberation. He did both of them. To be a Sishya, he told Krishna, I have surrendered to you. You are the one who is going to deliver the goods. I am your student. In this way, Arjuna surrendered so that Lord Krishna could do what was to be done.
Awesome. So just a little bit of notes here. Couple things. One is we have seen the three levels of students, right? Like we generally call students, but here we are talking about a Vidyarthi, Antevasi, and a Sishya. And what generally is taught about is the same person could be seen as a Sishya in one class and an Antevasi in the other and a Vidyarthi in the other. And we would have all gone through those kind of phases, right? If I've learned music, I could have been a Vidyarthi. Or in the school, I could have been an Antevasi if I was living in a residential school and just studied there. Or if I went to a guru seeking for Brahma Jnanam, or that is what I'm learning from somebody, then it changes. Like, the same teacher as, and I've sent a note in our Gita forum about variations of teachers at some point. So if you don't recollect which one it is, and or if you have joined the group after I sent that, I'll re-forward that particular thing. It talks about gradation of teachers based on teaching levels, an acharya versus a upadhyaya, who is an adhyapaka, and why Dronacharya has been addressed as an acharya by Duryodhana in the first chapter, who is a pandita, who is a drashta, and who is a guru. It all depends on the relationship between two people. So here, that's one part. Then Arjuna is actually seeing in a guru, in a person that was his cousin and his friend from childhood. And in the 11th chapter, when there is Vishwarupa Darshanam, you just like amazing, amazing slokas. And in one of the slokas, Arjuna says, and he's shivering at that time, just looking at the Vishwarupam. And he has, done some nice devotional verses. And then he says, I would have called you, hey Yadava, hey Krishna. I would have called you so many things. Like, I'm a friend. I did not realize when I was doing that, just, forgive me for saying all of those things, is how he prays. So somebody he moved around with like a friend, and he was his cousin, and now he brought him as a driver. But suddenly he knows this is the person that I'm seeking knowledge from, and then the relationship has completely changed. Previously he was saying, oh, we have come here together to, I don't know how we came here, without thinking this is going to cause a lot of distraction. He was combining both of them. He was using the dvivachanam. Now that relationship has changed as the complete surrender to get shreyas. And there is a bit of a noise. I'd appreciate if everybody can mute themselves, please. So that relationship has changed between the two members that are just sitting here. They have come here in different relationship. Now it just because of the surrender and that change in the tone, that I'm a Shishya now and I'm looking for Shreyas, where Swamiji was saying Shreyas and Shishya are connected together. Those are two important terms that have close relationship. The other point I wanted to raise, Mundaka Upanishad actually says something. Every human being, so I'll just read the translation for that verse. It's chapter 1, 12th verse of Mundaka Upanishad. Every human being should discover this fact that the human problem cannot be solved by worldly accomplishments, material accomplishments. Therefore, he has to go to the spiritual goal of life in life. And going to spiritual goal, the first step to do is to go to a guru. And this is a person, and this person will discover after a lot of experience that a guru will be required, and what I've been chasing all this time, the worldly accomplishments, is not what's going to get them the contentment or the happiness that they were seeking, but they do not even know that they were seeking happiness. And it says, it explains, like, the way Swamiji would have explained it. Some people discover this at the age of 20, some at 30, some at 90, and some people might not discover it till end of their life. But thank God in Hinduism, there is a next Janma, so there is always a next opportunity. But what's true though is one day everyone will have to come around to this, and there is no other way. And that's when, like, when all the samishti karmas have all ended and everybody has realized that what is the spiritual goal, that's when the unmanifestation will start happening. The pralayam will start happening, and the whole universe goes into the unmanifested mode. So just wanted to bring those three pieces of notes before we move into a fantastic sloka. Before we go into sloka, I also wanted to point out in the next verse where Sanjaya is about to speak, he uses the term Gudakesha for Arjuna. And what I was explained, my note says, Sanjaya is indirectly telling that Arjuna is a qualified person. And how is that? Gudaka means sleep, and sleep represents the tamogunam. So somebody, Gudakesha, therefore, one who is the master of tamoguna, or that means who is a sattva guna pradhana. I'm just going to mute. So, somebody who is eligible, and when we say sattva guna pradhanam, what does it mean? It goes back to the sadhana chatushtaya sampannaha, which is the viveka, vairagya, shatka sampatti, and mumukshutvam. We have spoken about that in the last couple classes as well. Somebody who is eligible. So all the Brahmajnana verses, especially the sutras, I mentioned that in Brahma Sutras, the first very sutram says, Athato Brahma Jignasa. What is Athato? Therefore, because you have been, trying to adjust your characteristics to become a sampanna, the sadhana chatushtaya sampanna. Now that you have done that, therefore, now starts Brahmajnanam. So here, just wanted to give that context about the eligibility of Arjuna before Krishna actually starts his Brahmajnana, starts teaching Brahmajnanam to him. So we'll move to Sloka 9. Who would like to take this one up?
I will read.
Could I do it?
I've heard, like, I think
Raga.
we need a hat and some some tossing here.
Mm.
I heard Taraji and I heard Pranati. I don't know who the other person is. Maybe that person should start. Just random picking.
Okay,
Sorry.
I will, because it's a very long one, I will do a portion and then someone can continue.
Correct. Exactly. We'll do one topic at a time instead of the full sloka.
Okay.
Devi ji, it's like resounding.
I know there are a few mics that are open because I've asked for who's going to read. I think a few people have unmuted. I'll mute them as soon as we start reading, Anita ji.
Sorry, Gudakesha means tamogunam or
Gudaka means tamogunam. Gudakesha
uh,
is somebody who is the master of tamogunam or who has sattva guna pradhanam. Gudaka plus keshaha. So Gudakesha, I think that's the split. Okay, whoever wants to pick up the first topic, and then we'll do it by topic this time, not the full sloka.
Okay. Sanjaya narrates the events through Dhritarashtra. Sanjayovacha eva muktva hishikesham Gudakesha parantapah na yotsya iti govindam muktva न योत्स्य इति गोविन्दं मुक्त्वा तूष्णीं बभूवः. Sanjaya Uvacha said, Parantapa, the scorcher of foes, Gudakeshaha Arjuna, Rishikesham to Lord Krishna, Evam in this manner, Uktva, having spoken, Na yotsye, I shall not fight, Iti, thus, Govindam to Govinda, Lord Krishna, Uktva, saying, Tushnim Babhuva, became silent, ha, indeed. Sanjaya said, having spoken to Rishikesha, Lord Krishna, in this manner, Gudakesha, Arjuna, the scorcher of foes, said, I shall not fight. Speaking thus to Govinda, Lord Krishna, he became silent. With these words, Sanjaya informed Dhritarashtra of the most recent events on the battlefield as he had been asked to do. Wanting Krishna to teach him Shreyas, Arjuna had said, I am your Shishya, please teach me. Arjuna seemed to know the profundity of the word Shreyas, a word mentioned often in the Shastra. In the Kathopanishad, there is a story about a young boy, Nachiketa, who went to Yama, the lord of death, and received three boons. He encashed the first in favor of his father, who was angry with him. For the second boon, he asked to be taught the ritual for gaining heaven. This boon, too, was for the sake of others. Lord Yama granted Nachiketas both of these boons. Nachiketa encashed the third boon for himself. He wanted to know whether there was a self, an Atma, other than the body, because some people said there was and others said there was not. He told Lord Yama that he wanted to be taught about this Atma and that there was no one more qualified to do it than Lord Yama himself. At first, Lord Yama discouraged him, but finally he decided to teach Nachiketa. Lord Yama told Nachiketa that there were always two things available to a human being, Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is chosen by one who is wise, a Viveki, whereas everyone else generally chooses Preyas, prosperity and pleasure, Artha and Kama. Dharma also comes under Preyas. Shreyas, on the other hand, is moksha, liberation, the freedom brought about by self knowledge. Nachiketa asked Lord Yama for this Shreyas. Because Shreyas can be used in both a relative and an absolute sense, it is important to know what it was that Arjuna was asking for. Whether Arjuna wanted it, Krishna understood Arjuna's request only in terms of the absolute Shreyas and not in the ordinary sense. The absolute meaning of Shreyas is absolute fullness, that which is good for me, good for you, good for everyone at any time and place. That which was good for Arjuna was equally good for Duryodhana if only he had ears for it. If Duryodhana had said to Krishna, I am your Shishya, please teach me, and if Krishna had considered Duryodhana a qualified student, he would have taught him in the same way. Whenever and to whomever Shreyas is taught, it is always taught the same way because it is knowledge, jnana. From Krishna's point of view, the Shreyas Arjuna asked for was this knowledge, which is moksha. In the wake of this knowledge, there is no sorrow, because this is the teaching of the Gita. From the beginning to the end, the Gita is Moksha Shastra, a body of teaching meant to destroy shoka, sorrow. Should someone want to continue?
Just one more paragraph, and I think
Okay.
somebody can take from
All
relative
right.
Shreyas. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Knowledge is something that cannot be personal. Although it has to be gained by a person, knowledge, any knowledge, is always true to the nature of the object of knowledge. It is not something that is centered on your personal will, but on the object of knowledge. For example, if the object is a flower, it is a flower. There is no choice in knowing it as anything other than the flower. If there is something more to know about a flower, then you know it, such as its botanical name, which includes its family and so on. Whatever more you come to know about the flower is always jnana, because knowledge is always as true as the object. It is not determined by your will. Therefore, knowledge of a thing is not going to differ from person to person.
Awesome. So I think we have covered most of these topics like Shreyas and Preyas, the Nachiketa story, Duryodhana could have been taught by Lord Krishna as well. Some of these have been completed. So one other piece of notes, probably from the previous when we were talking about the Sattva Guna Pradhanam and all of that, something that I remembered, I just wanted to add that as well. So in Tamogunam, like, when a student just falls asleep in a class because a particular subject is not appealing to mind, so that is considered the Tamogunam. And the other mind is the wavering mind, and doesn't stick, like, doesn't concentrate on the subject that is being taught. That is the Rajogunam is active at that time. And we have to know that though there is a primary guna. We are all like, we have all the three gunas in us, and there is one gunam that is very primary. If we look at the overall in our life, this is how we are. And there is one primary one, but then all the three gunas play different roles. For example, in order to sleep, I need gunam. I cannot just be rajogunam all the time and be active. If that's the case, I won't be able to fall asleep. So it is important to bring up our sattvika side when we are about to receive jnanam, especially like any jnanam for that matter, all knowledge, especially when we are about to go into the Brahma Jnanam verses from sloka 11 until sloka 25. A lot of attention would be required from our end because it's very easy to drift and shift focus, or just not even understand what's going on. So it's important to just start that with a nice prayer. So we will do that prayer before we get into the actual Gita Shastra. Just wanted to bring up that point as a reminder. Awesome. We'll move into relative shreyas. Pranati, do you want to read?
Yeah.
Yes, please. Usually, what is good for you at a given time may not be good for you at another time. For example, a particular drug may be a cure for your illness, although it is also a poison. So, what is good for you at one time is not good for you at another time. Also, certain medicine may be good for only one problem and not any other. Alternatively, the drug that treats your problem may not be good for someone else with the same problem because of the other person's allergic reaction to it. This kind of goodness is what is meant by relative goodness, something that is not always applicable in the same way. If it keeps on changing, it keeps on changing. Something that is good is determined by place. Desa, time, kala, and nimitta, situation. Even ethics and values, dharmasastra, which we generally consider as absolute, have to be interpreted from time to time. Because dharmasastra is to be interpreted, it cannot be considered absolutely good.
Awesome. We'll just pause here. So what we are talking about is, I'll just mute you, Pranati, for a quick second. So things that change, and one of the examples we can think about, smritis, and when we talk about smriti, manusmriti, and apastamba sutras and things like that, depending on a particular era, particular time period, those rules get made. And those rules are changeable because they are relative to what's happening at a particular time in the whole span of everything. But when we talk about Vedam, the Shruti, it is absolute knowledge. So what's in Shruti takes precedence over what's in the Smriti. So we first look for, okay, is this applicable to me? If it's applicable, if I have any confusion, and then I would have to refer back to the main Shrutis. That's how, like, the relative and absolute Shreyas are important to understand. Certain things are changeable based on circumstances, and certain things are absolutely not. And now we will look at the absolute Shreyas. Taraji, would you like to read here the next topic?
Yeah. Absolute stress. If there is
Yes.
something that is absolutely good, it must be something that does not change at any time
Did
and is
somebody have a
always
question?
Yeah, I was wondering, is given Dharma Shastra is to be interpreted, it cannot be considered absolutely good. So it is a relative,
Correct.
relative
Correct.
strength.
Because the Dharma Shastra would have changed. The Dharma Shastram in Ramayana, if we see the difference between Ramayana and Mahabharata, where Rama was playing the lead in the Ramayanam, the Dharma Shastra then was very different than how you see Lord Krishna playing his role in the next Yugam. So it is based on time period. So that's why I was actually trying to explain that, because even Dharma Shastra is to be interpreted, it cannot be considered absolutely good.
That's a relative one. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Taraj.
if there is something that is absolutely good, it must be something that does not change at any time and is always the same for any person. That's what is meant by Shreyas here. Arjuna's sorrow led him to ask for this Shreyas, and Krishna understood what he wanted as absolute Shreyas. Absolute Shreyas, called moksha, is the complete acceptance of oneself. Self acceptance implies a self that is already acceptable. If I'm not acceptable to myself, positive thinking cannot give me self acceptance. The self is unfolded in the Gita as already acceptable, along with how it is acceptable and how it's free from all limitations. The one who is happy with oneself has nothing more to do. Such a person is one who has checked off all the items to be completed, to be fulfilled that are on the list. He or she is a free person. Throughout the Gita, we are told that self is acceptable and that this acceptable self alone is what everyone is seeking in life. When Duryodhana wanted the kingdom, he wanted only self acceptance. He wanted to see himself as a person who was acceptable to himself. Without a kingdom, he could not see himself in this way. Therefore, he wanted the kingdom. In the process, of course, he had conflicts. He was cavilled at by so many people and he had wronged so many people. How could he be acceptable to himself under such circumstances? You should be acceptable to yourself without a kingdom, without any addition, without even the physical body and its condition. Only then can you accept yourself. If the body is something based on which you have self acceptance, you are in trouble because the body will change. It is not going to remain the same. The self might have been acceptable yesterday, but not today, because the body has picked up a problem. The body is time bound, it is subject to change, and it keeps changing. Therefore, in the morning it is acceptable, and in the evening it's not. We find that then that if the self depends on any other factor for its acceptability, it is not acceptable self at all. The self by itself in its own glory should be acceptable to you, for which it has to be free from, scroll down, any limitation whatsoever. The self is the whole. In reality, there is nothing other than self. This vision is unfolded in Gita in such verses as all beings exist in me and I do not exist in them. Matsthani sarva bhutani nachaham teshvavastitha. And in me there are no beings. Nacha matsthani bhutani. This means that while I do not depend on any of them, they all depend upon me. This is the vision of the whole, unfolded in the Shastra as the meaning of the word Shreyas.
Sorry, 1 second.
Shreyas is you. Until it is gained, Shreyas is an end, as it were. Once gained, it's not separate from you. It is you alone. You are Shreyas. Arjuna asked for it and he got it. If Arjuna had wanted ordinary Shreyas, he would not have told Krishna that he was his Sishya, nor would he have told him that he was surrendering to him. All this indicated that Arjuna wanted to gain absolute Shreyas at this particular stage of his life. Having surrendered to Krishna, Arjuna left everything to him. Krishna then had to decide whether he would teach Arjuna or merely urge him to stop blabbering and fight. Fortunately, Krishna taught him. Had he opted not to, we would not have the Gita.
Awesome. So I hope everybody now understands the relative and absolute Shreyas, because it is very, very important to know the difference, something that doesn't change. So we have been taking the example of what we seek. So what I seek today would be very different than what I seek tomorrow. So as a teenager, I might seek some pop music or some other kind of jazz music. But maybe when I am a little older, my music tastes would have changed and I'm looking for kirtans and bhajans. At some other point in my life, I might just say, I'm in the sounds of nature. I'm actually seeing, like, feeling Bhagwan. So that is the music that I want to hear. Just listen to nature and birds chirping. So what we seek is changing, but behind all of that, the one reason why we are seeking all of those things won't change. Because the same music, when even if it was metallic music I was listening to as a teenager, that would have given me happiness. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing that. Or when I'm listening to bhajans and kirtan, that's giving me happiness. That's why I'm doing it. Or if I want to listen to just nature sounds in the future, that's what I currently do, by the way. And in that, I'm finding happiness. Therefore, I'm listening to it. So, whatever we currently do that gives us happiness, and we could still say, I'm doing it. Oh, I have to do it and I have to cook for my kids. Like nobody says that, but I'm just giving you an example. Oh, I have to drive all the way to work because it is giving us some sort of happiness somewhere. If not the commute, maybe what we get out, the fulfillment that we get out of working or for whatever reason that is giving me happiness. That's why we are doing it. We have a very selfish rationale for our survival, our own happiness. So even if I am being very philanthropic and I'm just spending a lot of what I earn on donations and charity and feeding people, that I do that not for because of them, not for them, but because I get contentment, I get happiness by doing that. Or some people may be doing charity to get name and fame. So their happiness lies in their name and fame, and they're very worried at some point that would not happen if they did not donate more money. And they want to continue to maintain that because all we are seeking throughout life is that happiness. So, relatively, we could be seeking individual items or day to day activities that we do, but the absolute seeking that we do is that happiness or contentment, because that is the actual nature of the Parabrahman, the Satchidananda Parabrahma. That is the real nature of who we are, and that's what we tend to become. There are a couple terms that will come in the future, so I'm not going to just reveal what's going to come. So I'll just briefly mention it, where we say if there is, like, think about Arctic and you set up a bit of fire, it's super cold obviously, but the fire is still hot because the very nature of fire is hot, just like how our very nature is to be happy. And when we go through samsara, when we think we are this body, mind and senses, and we think some people or some activities or some situation can cause us to be not happy, that's when the samsara happens. But if we know our real nature is happiness and we really don't need some external things or external support to be happy, then it just changes our shift by 180 degrees, and we'll just be looking inwards, not outwards, for contentment and happiness. So just wanted to recap that before we move into the next topic. Thank you, Taraji. Who would like to read the next one?
Sridevi ji, um, so I understood like Shreyas and getting moksha and accepting yourself to go towards Shreyas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so I understand also if you have conflicts with someone or don't agree, then you're, accumulating that karma and, it's hard to also go towards Shreyas.
Mm.
But how is one having conflict doesn't mean you're accepting yourself. So
So if the whole universe is your own self, and the reason, okay, let's think about, just take a step back from there. Let's not go into that yet. So the way my Guruji used to explain is, if you're depending on your family or some person, like, it could be a boss or could be a neighbor, they are cardboard chairs, is what he used to call it. They are really good to for like decoration purposes. Nice decor for your home. You can arrange them the way you want, and they're all there. But what you shouldn't do is to sit on them. In his what he meant was, don't depend on them being aligned or in sync with you to maintain your happiness. And we've seen the example last week where Swamiji was saying, it is not the disobedient son that is the problem. It's our dependence on son's obedience that is the problem. We have an expectation from the boy, and if he's not meeting those expectations, that's when we get angry with them. And then, so we are causing the samsara to ourselves. We are causing the conflict because we have an expectation on the other person. But the other person has their own will and wish and their own prarabdha karma, all of those things that are guiding them. And they are in the control of all of the laws of nature. And we are not at all in control of anything on, like, my brother used to say, you don't have a remote control for that person. So if we don't have any control, but we do have expectations that they would behave in a certain way, that's when the conflict arises. So we are not free in the sense of we are tied to their behavior for our contentment. Did I make sense?
I think so. I mean, I understand all that, but I'm still trying to understand. So, if I mean, I understand what you're saying. If you're unhappy because of their behavior, so it's it's our problem, not their problem.
Mm.
But but how, like, even if you're not happy with what they're doing, even if you're are happy or not, but how does that lead to one's self acceptance? Is what I'm trying to understand.
The reason why we are not happy, right? Like, our real nature is to be content and to be happy. And if we are not, then we are not accepting ourselves as what we should be or what we are.
Okay. I think I understand. Yes.
Okay. Any other
Maybe
comments?
one more question. In answer to the question why Krishna chose Arjuna as opposed to Yudhishthira or Bhishma, so is it because Arjuna wanted to gain that absolute shreyas? Is that the right answer?
Yes. And actually, Arjuna asked for it and became the Sishya and
Okay.
did that surrender. Like, we were talking about, I think, in the Lalita Sahasranamam class last week, about this example that one of the Pravachanakartas provides. So, as long as the child, the infant, is playing with his toys, both the mother and father don't have to really, worry about the child, and they are doing their own stuff. They don't come and just particularly disturb the infant. But when there is a cry, then both mother and father will react. Similarly, when there is a need, when we reach out, and I keep telling everybody that I teach some other stuff, and I keep telling everybody, you take one step, mother will take 100 steps towards you. So here, Arjuna just did one chapter of his, showing his samsara, the raga, so shoka and moha. Now, Krishna will do 17 chapters to explain why he should be content and why he should just go and fight. Because he asked for it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right? Any other thoughts before we move on? And it is very, very important to understand these concepts. I will keep reminding everybody these are very important slokas, lay an amazing foundation for what's going to come in the next 18 chapters. So from sloka 11 to 25. And those 11 and 25, now we are about to start laying the bricks, the foundation to start the Brahmajnanam. So if there are any questions, any thoughts, anything that that you want to share, please do so. Don't hesitate. And I'm not necessarily the only one that should be talking. Like if you have you have heard about something, please do share with all of us. And I'm learning too. Okay. Who would like to read the next topic?
I can read.
Please go ahead.
Arjuna's attraction to sannyasa. In asking that Krishna teach him, there was a prayer, a surrender in Arjuna that calmed the storm within him. When there is a doubt or indecision, the mind is restless. When there is a possibility of a solution or a decision is made, then the mind quietens down. There is definitely restlessness when there is a conflict between dharma and adharma. In Arjuna's mind, there was a conflict between right and wrong, dharma and adharma, and there was the emotion of sympathy leading to his sorrow. Affections being involved, his mind was in an even greater state of confusion than it would have been had he merely been concerned about his duty. Arjuna's confusion naturally led to a certain sadness. Lord Krishna was a good listener, and perhaps the two verses wherein he tried to whip Arjuna into action also helped to trigger Arjuna's thinking. While trying to prove to Krishna that he was not frightened, Arjuna had to tell him that he could not handle this particular situation. He now saw himself as someone who was not as dispassionate as he was expected to be. Arjuna concluded that he would be better off living in a life of alms, a lifestyle mentioned in the Shastra for a sadhu, a person who gives up the pursuit of all desires. The life of a sadhu is meant purely for the pursuit of knowledge. Gnana and is free from all social, national, religious, or familial obligations. As a sannyasi, you are a non competitor in the society. You do not have a job, nor are you interested in anything in the next life like heaven and so on. Self knowledge is pursued to the exclusion of all else. The sannyasi is respected by the society and lives on alms, bhiksha. The Vedic society has a value for this lifestyle, and it is one of the four stages, ashramas, of a person's life. Sannyasa was exactly what Arjuna had in mind. He thought that a life of bhiksha would mean sannyasa, and he talked about it constantly. He knew that sannyasa was meant for gnana or moksha, and that it was not for securities and pleasures, artha, kama, and dharma.
Sorry. One
Um,
second.
and and
It,
there,
sorry, one second.
sure. I think we finished till there, artha, kama, and dharma.
Dharma, right? So I actually went to the next page.
If
So shall we pause here? Any questions or any thoughts on the previous topic, or can we move forward to the next one? Maybe I'll just mention one thing. As I mentioned, Shankaracharya provides intro to Bhagavad Gita before we start the slokas, but he hasn't written any commentary for the whole first chapter and for the first 9 slokas. And just before Sanjaya says Eva Muktva, the next sloka that comes up, Shankaracharya actually provides a very long description that I have right in front of me, but I felt maybe it's not the right time for us to discuss this. And in those days, when karma yoga, in the sense of more of the ritualistic karmas from the Veda, the Brahmanas, was the primary focus. It was important for Shankaracharya to come and explain to us why Jnana Yoga has to be focused on. So, Swarga Prapti was a big deal in those days, as you have seen even in Kathopanishad. Nachiketa is asking for that for all the other people, not for him. Uh, so, Shankaracharya provides a very long description on the conjunction of these two, like the Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga description, and how whether they should be conjoined to get Jnanam, or is it just one or the other? Can we just do Karma and get Moksha, or can we do just learn Brahma Jnanam and get Moksha, or do we need to do both? So those are the kind of questions that he resolves quite well. And the way he explains it, and I'll be very brief with this, and we will be learning about this more as we go into the next slokas, and especially in chapter 3, we'll talk a lot about Karma Yoga. For example, if we want to learn physics, and if we go into a physics lab and then start doing experiments, would we know physics? Or do we need some theory and get the understanding of physics and then go to the lab and do some experiments and kind of prove what we have read or what we have studied, and is then it's a conjoined practical versus theoretical knowledge? Or by just reading, do you get the knowledge? Whether you have practical experience or you have drawn the graphs or used the vernier calipers to figure out if it was proven or not, as knowledge itself. And the other example for I could give is, say, for example, somebody says, I don't know Ganga, for example, and somebody tells me where is Ganga and where it is flowing from, and what are all the touch points it touches and where is it getting merged, and they explain Ganga to me. So I have the knowledge of, a visual of the knowledge, but I don't need to go take a dip in Ganga in order to understand what Ganga is. By giving, understanding, reading the explanation, I know that it is a nadi, starts from the Himalayas. It's pretty sanct, and it merges in the Bay of Bengal. And it's a very powerful nadi. It touches these many cities. I get good understanding of it by just hearing about it or reading about it. I don't need to go take a dip in it to understand it. So Shankaracharya continuously insists on they're not necessarily, they don't need to be done together. Anything other than studying, reading, listening, the Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana about Jnanam, every other activity is considered Karma Yoga. Whether we do a puja, we do a ritual, I do dhyanam, I do meditation. Even in the meditation, I'm contemplating on the jnanam that I have learned. So he says all of this fall under one bucket called Karma Yoga. And Karma Yoga helps us purify our mind and stabilize our mind in preparation for gaining the Sattva Gunam in order to understand the knowledge that is about to come to us. But it is the knowledge of the Brahman, knowledge of the one universal Bhagavan, that would come only by just learning or by gaining the knowledge by no other means. And Shankaracharya takes a lot of time to explain this before actual slokas start. I just wanted to mention that as some of this, the reason why Arjuna is asking for, okay, I just want to run away and become a sannyasi. And Bhagavan considers that to be escapism. Yes, self-knowledge and doing this in pursuit of self-knowledge in exclusion of all else is what sannyasis do. But then when somebody becomes a sannyasi, there are certain criteria. And even today we see some sannyasis being lost in weed and that sort of stuff. And we also notice some sannyasis still bothered a little bit about their future. But once you become a sannyasi, you don't have to bother, or you shouldn't be bothering about that. Or some sannyasis holding grudge and cursing and all of that, that still happens. So Bhagwan says, don't think you are ready for it, because you still hold a lot of grudge on your cousins. And without that, even if you became a sannyasi, went and sat under a tree, you would be thinking about them that you had an opportunity, but you did not kill them because you were trying to save your grandfather and your teacher and some other people that you were attached to. But your grudge won't go away, your mind won't be stable, and you'll be sitting in ochre robes just thinking about them. Neither you're good here, like you haven't done your job, nor you're going to be good there. So therefore, it is not suitable for you. And he says, do your job, get the purity of mind, get the stability of mind, and that's when you can go pursue self-knowledge. So I just wanted to clarify that, but we will go into what Shankaracharya says and why he says that as we go into a few. Or first, we'll start with Jnana Yoga and then we go into Karma Yoga. I think we have time for just one more topic. Maybe we could
So,
finish.
Sridevi, so it's not just getting the knowledge, but practicing it too, right?
So there are two aspects to it. Vidyaranya Swamiji actually has written there like multiple books that have been written about it. Is it just gaining the knowledge? If somebody tells me, so maybe we'll spend the next few minutes just understanding this, because we are about to get into knowledge. We need to know what that knowledge is. What we call as parokshanubhuti and aparokshanubhuti. Gaining the knowledge, and it is still paroksham to me. It is external to me, and I'll explain what that means. And aparoksham means it's not external. The knowledge and me don't have a difference. What it means, and there are some examples that they give. For example, every one of us would have heard the story about the 10 students, the students who are not very intelligent, and they go out and they have to swim across a river. And when they do, the river is flowing very fast. So after they cross the river, on the other side, they want to make sure that all 10 of them have crossed without any losing anybody on the way. So they start counting. And every person, every student that is counting, he counts everybody else except himself. So they keep getting only 9 people, but they were 10. So they start wailing that they lost somebody on the way. So a passerby asks them why they are crying and what's happening, and they say we were 10 and now we lost one of our friends, and we're just crying for him. So this person says, okay, let me just count, and he counts and he says, no, all 10 of you are there, and you are the 10th person. So we call this the 10th man story. What it means is that person is telling you you are, and this person has that aparoksha jnanam that yes, like okay, oh, I wasn't counting myself. It's very clear to his head that I didn't count myself, therefore I am the person. So when jnanam comes to us and it is taught to us that aham brahmasmi or tattvamasi is told to us that you are the Brahman, and we understand aham brahmasmi, that knowledge, if it is so clear to us, it's crystal clear, we completely understand it, and that also depends on uttamadhikari, madhyamadhikari, and adhamadhikari. And if we understand that really well, then the jnanam is called as the aparoksha anubhuti, and Shankaracharya has written a prakarana grantha just for that. The other side of this is somebody tells me that, and I have no idea what that means. I understand it intellectually, but I am not able to internalize it. There is something blocking in me, between me and knowledge. So the knowledge has not synced itself in me as much. It's not a merged knowledge. So it's still external to me. That is called as the paroksha jnanam. So simply reading a book, and the simpler example that Swamiji gives is somebody knows to read English, and if he goes to read a medical book or surgical book, can he do a surgery? But a person who has gone through the steps of becoming a surgeon reads that book, then understands it. So that person is a lot more closer to that knowledge than the person who just knows how to read words together and read that book. So the difference between the two have to be merged. And there is a lot of preparation that goes on. And that preparation in a spiritual path is the karma yoga. Did that make sense? Did that answer your question? Let me know if I confused everybody.
I think I understood what you're
Yeah,
saying.
it is very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good.
So it's important to take the steps, and that's why I really wanted to do these 3 classes together, because on one end we are talking about Vedanta, the Gita Shastra talks about Vedanta, Jnana and Yoga and Karma Yoga. Vishnu Sahasranamam is all Vedanta and understanding the Parabrahman, and Lalita Sahasranamam is all about the Karma Yoga and how we get the energy. So it's like a fantastic combination of all the three, and doing it simultaneously gives us the various aspects of spiritual growth. So I'm hoping everybody is feeling that way too, because I'm quite energized doing these three simultaneously. Okay, unless there are any further questions, we'll conclude here.
Yeah, Guruji, there is one line I thought it might mix it all up. The line I heard is knowledge without execution is ignorance. And I think ignorance is in a way that you are not connecting with the Brahman probably. But I think you rightly said it's all the execution that leads us to the ultimate knowledge, which is nothing but the truth. And I think the execution is all the Karma Yoga, and the knowledge itself is the Brahma Yoga, which is the Gnana Yoga. Probably that's my understanding. And
Yeah,
this is all coming together from your story. Yep.
exactly. And we will, make these topics much clearer as we will understand what Bhagavan is talking about as we go through the next 10 or so slokas. It'll be much clearer for us. Any other thoughts before we conclude? Okay. So I hope everybody practices Sattva Gunam for the next so many slokas, at least at the minimum. And once you pass that bridge, I think everything starts becoming much, much clearer. Okay, we'll conclude it here with a Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Sarvam Srimannarayana Charanaravindarpanamastu. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up next week. Oh, by the
Thank
way,
you.
just wanted to mention that I am not available to do next week's class. And I will also stop that one.